What it do, what it do, what it do. It's your boy Big Val Opinion back with another live video. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that share button. And most importantly, make sure you sub to the channel. Turn on that post notification bell so that you be notified each and every time that your boy Big Val is going live, man. With that being said, let's get into this intro. Welcome to Big Val Opinion. Moderators, with my permission, any negativity in the chat should be hidden from this channel. This channel is a negativity-free channel, drama-free channel, and we are here to push the message out. We will not be distracted. So with my permission, any negativity in the chat should be hidden from this channel. Welcome to Big Val Opinion Platform.
And I just really want people to know, I appreciate anybody that's helping me. I appreciate anybody that's helping me. A lot of people have been there for me. I just don't want people going back and forth, being mad at each other because one person did this for me and another person did that for me. That's what the devil wants. He wants to cause confusion. That's what these people want. They want to cause confusion. And confusion ain't going to do nothing but keep me in here. But the real thing here, lifetime, as far as quick on lifetime, as far as lifetime is concerned, there are real people, real women out here really being abused, really missing. They're really missing. They're really chained up in basements. I've been in here 4 years. I haven't seen one person that was ever chained up in a basement come forward for anything. But I tell you one thing, before Lifetime came out, I was minding my business. I was in the studio. I was working with celebrities. I had tours. But when Lifetime came out, all of that went away. Meaning, before Lifetime came out, I had no charges pending against me. Nobody had went to a radio station or had went to, a police station. It took a year to put together Lifetime. If all of the things they said I did on Lifetime were true, it only take a minute to go to a police station. But when there's a crime committed, you don't go make a movie on it. You go to the police station. Nobody had done that.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Big Val Opinion, back with another live video. This is a follow-up video from earlier today's video about R.KELLY oral arguments. First off, let me say, hopefully we can get an understanding for people who have questions about how things were and how things took place, and hopefully help get people to understand that these oral arguments isn't like a typical court hearing. You know, you're not going to see a prosecutor and a defense lawyer going head to head. This is not that. This is not what this is about. This is more so about the judges in the Second Circuit, having questions about the paperwork that was entered in by the prosecutor or either the defense. So hopefully we can try to get an understanding to that for people with this live today. We're going to go back and listen to it again, where we'll be able to pause at certain points and interject, at certain junctures of this video. I want to thank each and every one of you who came out this morning and joined the live stream and other hearing. Thanks for everyone who's been sharing it, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Facebook, whatever social media platform you have. I want to say I appreciate you sharing it. Um, well, we're gonna dive into it. I'm just trying to wait a little bit. Also, I do have a question. Um, I was thinking I should play the video from Tracy viewpoint. Um, because she's going to tell you the employees that the government is insisting there was a part of this RICO who worked in an assertive effort to recruit young women and for Mr. Kelly sexual purposes and to promote his music. So um so my question is to you guys and ladies that are listening, do you all want to hear who the RICO, who you all want to hear who the people are that's involved in this RICO that they have against Mr. Kelly? And then we play the hearing following that, or do you all want to hear the hearing first? And then we play the video of the employers or employees or enablers sack. So that's the question, because I want you all to be able to understand, what they're saying and what they are talking about. Because earlier, as we listened, we heard the prosecution lawyer, saying what Mr. Kelly's workers testified to or claim or alleged to have been testified to versus what's in the actual paperwork. So I seen a lot of comments, some people, feeling like, well, Jennifer didn't do X, Y, and Z. Some people, I think we all can agree that the judge made us feel, kind of iffy, but at the same time, it was only so much that Jennifer could do. Um, and for the judge, it kind of seems to me the judge was trying to get her to go against. I mean, because she kept repeating the same thing. Her purpose for what was her intent, with the information that she put in, you know. So, but hopefully this right here will help you guys understand how this process works when it comes to the hearing. So I'm gonna let you all hear this quick. And shout out to a view from Tracy Point, because she's helping us understand this information.
Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And yes, this is like the fourth video that I have done today, but if you have been following along since Friday, then you know that I am taking the long form videos that I did regarding R.KELLY's appeal to the United States Court of Appeals in the second district for his conviction in the Eastern District of New York. They are going to have oral arguments for that appeal. And as I explained in the prior videos, that Jennifer Bonjean actually appealed to the Eastern District of New York. Of course, Ann Dunley denied that appeal. So then she appealed to the U.S. Circuit, the Second Circuit, who supersedes the Eastern District of New York, or oversees the Eastern District of New York, and they have agreed to hear Mr. Kelly's appeal. And so what's going to take place on March 18th, tomorrow, or possibly the 19th, I may have the dates mixed up, but what's going to take place is oral arguments, and oral arguments are only about 15 minutes. And the reason I am doing these recap videos is because at the Northern District of Illinois appeals hearing with the Court of Appeals, I believe it's the 7th Circuit for Illinois, but people were shocked to find out that these hearings are only like 15 minutes. And what I tried to explain is that they received like hundreds of pages of documents from Jennifer Bonjean over a year ago. She submitted all of the transcripts, the case filings, everything that every motion that she filed with Ann Dunley, that Ann Dunley kicked back to her. All of that has already been sent to the 2nd Circuit. They've already reviewed it. They've agreed to hear Mr. Kelly's case. So tomorrow is the oral arguments, where they'll basically just ask 1 or 2 questions about things that they're not clear about, and to get more information from Ms. Bonjean, as well as the prosecutors in that case. They'll ask them some questions and let them speak, and then they will take the case under advisement and decide if they want to rule in Mr. Kelly's favor, or if they are going to uphold his conviction and his sentencing. And this could take, so don't be alarmed, this could take up to 18 months. You guys know with the Bill Cosby case, I think it was maybe a little over the 18 months before they finally came back with a decision to overturn his conviction. So don't expect a response like in the next week, the next month, or maybe even the next 6 months. This could take up to a year and a half for them to come back with a response. It's really up to the court how soon they want to take this under advisement and when they want to give out a ruling. So with that being said,
so when you go to this court, it's, let's say, it's about 15 minutes to each side, and in these hearings, you know, it's the judges who have questions, you know, and they have questions for both, you know, both sides, and they allow them to give answers or whatnot. And you know, from there, you know, they take the case up to go back, you know, to go and review it, you know, and then they come back later down the road with answer. But it was some things that popped off, and let's see, we just get to it. All right, let's go.
Okay. All right. And is it Ms. Bonjean or Bonjean? How do you pronounce your name?
Bonjean.
Bonjean. All right. Ms. Bonjean, you have reserved 3 minutes for rebuttal, so that gives you 7 minutes out of the gate.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
May it please the court. My name is Jennifer Bonjean, and I represent Robert Kelly. Like every RICO indictment seemingly in history, the government charged the defendant with being the member of an enterprise that had a common purpose of carrying out an illegal or illicit activity.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand, are you challenging the jury instruction, which didn't say that the RICO enterprise had to have an illegal purpose?
No, Your Honor, I'm not challenging the
And this is this point. I think this made a lot of people feel some type of way, because you say she got 7 minutes to talk, and soon as she started talking, going into her point, this judge just interject so conveniently and just start assuming what Jennifer is doing versus just allowing her to explain what it is that she's trying to do. Now, I do understand the courts have a job to do, and I understand that, but you give her this moment to speak so she can say what her intentions are. You don't just interject and assume what her intentions are. Let her explain what her intent is.
Seven minutes out of the gate.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
May it please the court. My name is Jennifer Bonjean and I represent Robert Kelly. Like every RICO indictment seemingly in history, the government charged the defendant with being the member of an enterprise that had a common purpose of carrying out an illegal or illicit activity.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand, are you challenging the jury instruction, which didn't say that the RICO enterprise had to have an illegal purpose?
No, Your Honor, I'm not challenging the jury instruction, nor could the jury instruction be challenged. The jury instruction is entirely consistent with United States versus Boyle. In fact, it's almost word for word the same jury instruction. And in Boyle, as this court may recall, where the enterprise or the instruction was challenged, even though it wasn't set out with specificity what the structure of the enterprise should be, the Boyle court said that's fine. It doesn't have to be. The jury doesn't have to be instructed with that level of specificity. In this case,
but you're arguing, it seems to me, that absent an illegal purpose, there can be no RICO enterprise.
yes, because it would make nonsense of the statute.
Okay, but is it so? I guess A, what's the authority for that, and B, isn't that really a challenge to the jury instruction?
I don't believe it is. I think that.
Well, did the district court tell the jury that they had to find an illegal purpose so there could be no enterprise?
No, but the indictment did, and the indictment was incorporated.
No, the indictment listed a series of purposes.
Yeah, series of purposes pled in the conjunctive, and the jury instruction, which had the indictment incorporated into it, pled that there were 4 different purposes, 2 of which were legal essentially, and 2 which were illegal.
All right, but I'm asking a basic question to start, which is that if the government had just listed the legal purposes, your view is that that would not be sufficient for a RICO indictment?
No, in fact, district courts routinely dismiss complaints that do not demonstrate that the purpose of the common or the enterprise is illegal in nature. In fact, neither party has been able to find a single case where the purpose of the enterprise was entirely
You're arguing
legal.
that there was insufficient evidence here to prove an illegal purpose?
Correct, or illicit or fraudulent or some type of
Wasn't there substantial evidence?
no, Your Honor, I respectfully disagree. There was substantial evidence of
Please, finish.
yes, there was substantial evidence perhaps of defendants' wrongdoing in the context or using quote unquote the machinery of his organization, his entourage, those types of individuals. But there was very little evidence, almost and certainly not sufficient to meet the government's burden of proof, that any of those individuals acted with this common purpose to, quote, recruit women for Mr. Kelly for illegal sexual activity or for the production of child pornography.
Yes, that's the only purpose for this. That's the only purpose for these briefs. These briefs are primarily questions that the judges have, and the thing is, when you hear this judge, well, Bunjean gets started before she could even go into the context of what she's stating. The judge right off the bat cuts the conversation off. I understand it. I understand very well that it's questions that they need to be answered, but I know that this is a process and it has to take place. But a lot of people who have questions and they look at these type of things like, man, it's being one-sided or it's biased or Jennifer not doing what she's supposed to do. Well, you can only do so much in this setting that they are in, because it's not like a regular court hearing where both the prosecutor and the defense lawyer is going back and forth. No, this is not that.
Did, and the indictment was incorporated.
No, the indictment listed a series of purposes.
Yeah, series of purposes pled in the conjunctive, and the jury instruction, which had the indictment incorporated into it, pled that there were 4 different purposes, 2 of which were legal essentially, and 2 which were illegal.
All right, but I'm asking a basic question to start, which is that if the government had just listed the legal purposes, your view is that that would not be sufficient for a RICO indictment?
No, in fact, district courts routinely dismiss complaints that do not.
And see, this is my point. And this is the point that I was looking at. Instead of listening to what she's saying, this particular judge is assuming. He say, I'm assuming. He's assuming. Well, if you allow this attorney to speak, then you won't have to assume what she's trying to say. I'll let you make your point. I'll question things about your point, so on and so forth. But when she start, the judge just interject and say, well, I assume you're trying to say this, or I assume, and I understand. I understand that the judges are at liberty to ask as many questions to understand this as they want to. But Jennifer's biggest thing is in the paperwork that she put in, the paperwork that she entered. A lot of our concerns are, a lot of the concerns and a lot of the things that we talk about, it has been put in record. They have all of this paperwork and documents.
That the purpose of the common or the enterprise is illegal in nature. In fact, neither party's been able to find a single case where the purpose of the enterprise was entirely
You're
legal.
arguing that there was insufficient evidence here to prove an illegal purpose?
Correct, or illicit or fraudulent or some type of
Wasn't there substantial evidence?
No,
No.
Your Honor, I respectfully disagree. There was substantial evidence of yes, there was substantial evidence perhaps of defendant's wrongdoing in the context of using quote unquote the machinery of his organization, his entourage, those types of individuals. But there was very little evidence, almost and certainly not sufficient to meet the government's burden of proof, that any of those individuals acted with this common purpose to, quote, recruit women for Mr. Kelly for illegal sexual activity or for the production of child pornography.
So I'd like to just make sure I understand. It sounds to me as though you're making a legal argument that a RICO enterprise has to have an illegal purpose, as well as that here an illegal purpose was charged, but there was insufficient evidence of it.
Yes, Your
Is
Honor,
that right?
that's correct. That is precisely right.
And I want to understand, in light of Turquette, why we have to find an illegal purpose as
Yes.
well. I mean, there's language in Satinwood, and most of the cases that have been cited and discussed are in the context of a fraudulent purpose that may have some legitimate enterprise around it, but there's room for confusion there. But Turquette seems to say quite directly that the term enterprise as used in RICO encompasses both legitimate and illegitimate enterprises. So maybe you could help me.
Yes, the issue isn't whether it was a legitimate organization, a legal entity versus a non-legal entity. Turquette held, and the question before Turquette was the exact opposite, whether a RICO enterprise could be exclusively criminal, not whether it could be exclusively legal. And our position is that this was an organization that the government failed to prove had any criminal purpose. The government takes the position that for a RICO enterprise to exist, it need not be rooted in criminality at all, which would fly in the face of Turquette, frankly. Turquette looked at Congress's intent, both the statement of—
Didn't the government prove that one of the purposes of this enterprise was to recruit girls so that Kelly could have illegal sexual activity with them?
They pled it, they did not prove it. What they did prove is that through the course of a period of time, there were perhaps efforts to pass along information, a phone number, to invite someone backstage. There was no evidence presented that any of those individuals did so believing or knowing that someone was underage, that you go to a big concert, there are 17, 18, 19-year-olds. Even the victims themselves said, well, nobody asked me for my age. When the age came about, perhaps Mr. Kelly may have known, and that's what I think some of the women testified to, but there was no evidence that anyone went out there saying, may I find out what your age is? Are you underage? Come back. We want to serve you up to Mr. Kelly. That just didn't happen. And in fact, there is extraordinary evidence that and members of the enterprise, again, these are some of the people, I guess, that testified, repeatedly made it clear that what happened behind closed doors was not something they understood. Yes, there were rules and things they did, these anodyne tasks that were perhaps a little unusual, but not that put them on notice that what was happening behind closed doors was illegal. And we are talking about matters that happen behind closed doors. The fact that a video recorder existed in a bedroom does not ipso facto make it evidence that there is child pornography.
You're saying these other individuals didn't know that these girls were underage? That's
exactly what I'm saying. I think the evidence that was presented to the jury was deficient in that regard. That there was so much excessive evidence, frankly, about Mr. Kelly's wrongdoing that it would be easy to be tempted to go down the path. Well, everybody must have known, but that is just not what was demonstrated at trial. And
the appearance of these girls would be evidence enough, wouldn't it?
These were not 12.
Brother Derek, man, what you think about that? What you think about the judge saying, "Oh, you should be able to look at a woman and tell whether she's young or old"? Like, come on, man.
That's been the misconception for years. That is ridiculous because if that's the case, I can look at a woman and be like, "Hey, you just turned 22. Hey, you just turned 35. Look at that 40-year-old." You can't do it.
No,
You can't do it. I mean, so people are as we've noticed so many times, people look right on a pure emotion, and instead of what's actually happening, it's literally about feelings. That's literally a conjecture. Your perception of what perception is reality, and that's where we get messed up in the legal system because what you perceive is not necessarily real. You could be in a desert and you could see a damn ocean, and you go dive in there. There's nothing because that was your perception, just based off of how you felt at the moment.
right.
You was thirsty, you wanted some water, and you saw some. You know,
You was hallucinating. You
yeah.
know,
So a lot of these people are absolutely, you know, and I don't want to. Prejudge, but just I would just hope that it was just playing devil's advocate.
right. I think so too.
you know,
You
you
know,
know, because because truth be told, like I said before, man, they have the transcripts, they have all of these things, and when it's an oral argument, that's what has to happen. There needs to be an argument. There needs to be a discussion. There needs to be questions asked. If they sat there and not, I don't want for the R. Kelly supporters to just get all up in arms because they feel like the things aren't going their way, or they hear something that they don't like in the courtroom. In order for you to get to the point where you are making the right decisions, you have to ask questions. You can't just assume anything.
uh-huh.
They asked the other attorney questions as well, and she was all over the place.
Right.
She didn't know what was going on.
We finna get there. We most definitely finna get there. We let it play a little bit more, and we'll interject what we see fit.
12-year-olds, these were not 13-year-olds. There were some what was testified to is that some of them looked young. And having, multiple teenagers myself, looking young does not mean someone is a minor. And the question becomes, did they have an obligation to ask? Did they have to do due diligence, do inquiry? When he said, just go pick somebody up. Again, just using individuals, unwitting individuals.
Even when we look at that, and it's not going out, I'm pausing it because I want y'all to listen to what they saying. They saying that these what they're saying is what statements that came from the employees who they say is part of this enterprise. They saying he say go find somebody that look young. That's hearsay. How can they prove that this man told them to go find somebody that look young?
Right. That's absolutely correct. I mean, it's all hearsay.
Right.
However, this is the sole purpose of charging a RICO because hearsay evidence is admissible, and they take it more as a factual statement than not in these circumstances. So that is why that they even came to the forefront and said, "Hey, let's charge the man with a RICO," because they know they don't have to work for it. They don't have to work for it at all.
Facts. Let's get to rolling a little bit more. I'm gonna let it play a little bit longer now. We're gonna finish. We're gonna let it play to the end of Bunjean argument, and then we'll stop it before they go to the prosecutor.
who perhaps even turned a blind eye or who didn't inquire further, does not a RICO enterprise exist? And I would leave with this point that, simply speaking, I mean, I won't leave with it, but the law presumes in Turquette, which was an entirely criminal enterprise, they weren't speaking to the question of whether it could be a legal enterprise with a one man doing illegal acts in the context of the enterprise and using his employees. So Turquette does not, from where we stand, put this issue to rest. And what the government wants to do is simply read out of the statute organized crime. And at the end of the day,
They want to read out organized crime? What are you saying?
Yes, because the purpose of the statute, the RICO statute, is to address organized crime. Now,
It's not in the text, though, right? When you say read it out,
the
right?
definition of organized crime is not in the text of the statute. And in fact, courts have universally read organized crime very liberally, very broadly. And we're not quarreling with that. But you can't just have an organization that is not associated with any crime. Simply speaking, a RICO enterprise is a criminal organization. You can define it broadly, but is not an organization simply with a criminal. And that is what the government is asking the court to find here. I believe my time has expired.
But I mean, you're not challenging the jury instruction. So you're agreeing that everything the district court told the jury they needed to find was correct, right?
Your Honor, the jury instructions were consistent with every jury instruction ever given in a RICO case, historically. And frankly, is consistent with what the United States Supreme Court held in Boyle.
Right.
I don't know how.
So the jury wasn't asked to read out portions of the statute. The
Again, I go
jury was
back-
correctly instructed. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out, you're saying that the evidence didn't support the elements that were correctly instructed to the jury.
What I am saying, Your Honor, is that the government had an obligation, and in fact, the jury was instructed that the government had to prove the theory of the enterprise. The theory of the enterprise included criminal conduct that was pled in the conjunctive. And if it had been just simply legal activity pled in that indictment, it would have been dismissed. Because routinely, again, and we cite numerous cases, as does the government, district courts simply do not allow RICO prosecutions or RICO suits to move forward where you don't have an actual fraud or illegal or illicit activity that is the moving force or that is the common purpose. This would be outside the realm of, again, contrary to the purpose.
Back on the issue of whether the staff knew the age, sometimes the staff booked the travel arrangements for them, and therefore they had to have identification documents. Isn't that evidence that they knew they were underage?
I think if you look closely at the record, you will see that the government was very clever, frankly, of conflating these issues where I do not believe there was any evidence that a employee booked travel for someone who was in fact under the age of consent. So you have to remember in Illinois, the age of consent is 17. It only becomes a federal crime if it's being videotaped. Now, do these people know what's happening in the bedroom? No. There is no evidence that
Wasn't there evidence that the staff made sure that in his backpack he had his iPad and recording equipment? The evidence doesn't show that?
It shows that people picked up his luggage. I mean,
He say, is there evidence to show that the staff picked up the backpack where he had iPad and video recording equipment? Boy, this shit funny, boy.
That
Where you go, Derek?
type of stuff.
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Oh, I'm saying that means that they was invading privacy and all type of stuff,
Right.
rooting through his crap. Which I can probably believe that, just judging by what Officer A, Tawana Ingram did. People just wanted to know what was going on with dude. So people be rooting through his stuff, but I don't think that even if you saw an iPad, you got to unlock it.
Right.
I mean, what the fuck? Oh my God.
Let's go ahead, man. This is crazy.
People pick up my luggage. I pick up other people's luggage. Am I responsible for what's in that luggage? It just takes this to the point of absurdity. We can't say an enterprise exists because unwitting employees are engaging in normal tasks that they do, particularly for high-profile people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bensing?
May it please the court, Assistant United States Attorney.
And this is what got people kind of like what's going on because of how they allowed this the government representative to speak. But guess what? Don't be so discouraged because they're gonna put the vice grips on them in a minute.
Attorney Kayla Bensing on behalf of the government. Good morning, Your Honors. I want to start with the defendant's challenge to his RICO conviction and what constitutes an enterprise. As the district court stated at the sentencing in this case, the defendant had a system in place that lured young people into his orbit and then he took over their lives. And so I want to start with this claim that was made in the reply brief and is made today before the court, that the enterprise members or that the defendant used his inner circle to simply carry out.
And make sure, everybody, make sure y'all taking notes of the people that they are naming as the part this part of the RICO enterprise. Man, go on with that balloon.
Anodyne activities. Demetrius Smith, the defendant's.
What evidence is there in the record that the staff who arranged these things knew that they were underage?
Yes, Your Honor. So in September.
The first person we have is Demetrius Smith.
December of 1994, I'll start there with the victim, Addie, who testified. She testified that she was 17. She was invited by Kelly's bouncers to come backstage at a concert in Miami. That was 3 days after Kelly's marriage to Aaliyah, in which he bribed a county official in order to hide or alleviate the consequences of illegal sexual activity. And obviously members of his enterprise arranged for that bribery, and so we're well aware of that illegal sexual activity. A few years later, in 1998, Stephanie, who was the victim named in Racketeering Act 2, was approached at a McDonald's by a member of Kelly's entourage. He asked how old she was. She told him that she was 16. Kelly's associate then gave her Kelly's phone number and said Kelly wanted her to call him. This is the same girl who at 17 was instructed by Kelly to give him oral sex in the backseat of a car and to be vocal and make noise while doing so, so that Kelly's driver and another.
So make sure y'all remember everything that this representative for the government is saying.
Their individual who were present in the car could hear, which was a obviously deeply humiliating experience for her. Turning next to Nicholas Williams, he was one of the defendant's runners beginning in 2003. He answered phones and escorted Kelly's girlfriends inside of Kelly.
Nicholas Williams. Nicholas Williams.
The studios, and he testified that Kelly's female guests were very young, keeping in mind that he was 19 at the time. He also testified that he could hear sexual activity and yelling between the defendant and his female guests. The jury is entitled to infer from that Kelly's employees helped maintain and facilitate Kelly's contact, including sexual contact, with these underage women. I want to also turn to Anthony Navarro's testimony. He was another one of the runners.
Anthony Navarro.
Employed by Kelly. Navarro, who started working for Kelly in 2007, specifically identified that he would help answer phones for Kelly's girlfriends. That was his word, and there was some claim in the reply brief that these were just female guests, but he testified using the word girlfriends. And he identified them as looking very young, specifically mid-aged teenagers. And the jury heard testimony from Deronda about how she recognized Navarro as one of Kelly's runners who she interacted with when she was 16 years old, being sexually abused by Kelly. In addition, there's Cheryl Mack. She was Kelly's assistant beginning in
Cheryl Mack.
approximately 2013. She repeatedly saw Kelly with 17-year-old Jane. She had booked travel for Jane as early as April 2015, so she knew Jane's age. And a couple months later, in July of 2015, she testified that she observed Jane going to perform oral sex on Kelly. There's also Suzette Mayweather's testimony. She learned that Jane was 17 years old in the fall of 2015. She knew that
Suzette Mayweather.
That Jane was one of Kelly's girlfriends. She observed her following all of the same rules as Kelly's other girlfriends. There's also testimony from Jane about Juice, who was another one of the defendant's girlfriends, but whom Jane testified acted as one of the defendant's assistants. Juice helped teach Jane rules, and Juice also knew.
She wasn't, she acted as if. Acted, and is and acted is two different things.
Jane's age, I believe that's in the special, I believe that's SA 527. So this is all evidence that the jury was entitled to infer that Kelly's inner circle knew what was going on, that he was recruiting and maintaining underage women for sexual activity.
Does the, I guess the allegation that Kelly was also inducing these folks to come in violation of state law because he was infected. Is there evidence that his entourage or the folks in the enterprise knew about Kelly's status as infected with herpes?
Yes, there is. There's testimony that his assistants picked up his Walgreens records. Anthony Navarro, who was one of the runners, testified that he would pick up Valtrex for Kelly. That's at A467 to 68. Diana Copeland accompanied Anna, who was one of the testifying victims at the trial, to the hospital for her STD test. And only Diana Copeland received the results of that test, not Anna.
Man, come on, y'all. Now, we need for the people to come on now. We need for the people to come on now. Diana accompanied Anna to the hospital, but they gave Anna hospital records to Diana. This is shit they want us to believe.
Juice, again, who Jane testified was like an assistant to Kelly, took
Was
Jane.
there evidence that the staff knew that Kelly wasn't disclosing his condition?
Well, a number of the women, in fact, obtained, got an STD. They were not just exposed to it.
Why did she not answer the question? Why did she not answer the question? Do y'all have information that he wasn't disclosing to these women that he had an STD? She skipped right on around that shit. You caught that, Derek?
Man, you know I did. You know good and damn well. Look, man, did none of that whole section didn't make no fucking sense. Everything she said in that whole section of mouth running was all fucked up. Who the fuck? I can send you to go get my prescription, but ain't nobody finna hand you my motherfucking results and medical records and shit.
Yeah, she said that the man picked up Mr. Kelly Walgreens records, man.
That's a HIPAA law violation.
And these companies are not finna risk that, you know, being sued behind something that's so simple as that.
Silly shit.
I mean, and this, you know what? They say that's what they want people to believe, but the fucked up thing about it is people believed it.
Yeah.
That's you know, they might want to desperately want for you to believe it, but the craziest shit about it is people bought it and was like, oh yeah, he messing with little girls and he doing this and he doing that
I think this
with
judge fucked
no.
her head up when he asked, "How did y'all? Do y'all got any evidence to show you to prove that he did not tell one of these? He did not tell these females that he had an STD. She couldn't. She couldn't say nothing.
Basically, the evidence is what they talking about. You know, like I said, testimony is now evidence, bro. You know, you ain't got to prove shit. You can just say it.
Uh-huh.
I need to go to court and say a motherfucker stole $1 million from me and see if I can get that shit.
Knew we need that.
My testimony should be deemed true. You know, and like I said, the only reason why they was able to do this shit because they peddled these females around and had a bunch of them just say, "Oh, he's an asshole." Yeah, the Faith Rogers running around telling lies, all type of stupid shit. You know, so it's interesting because we sitting up here listening to this, and this woman can't. She don't know what the fuck going on. She and saying he wanted to lure young girls, and this was a habit. It's not a habit because of the fact that you can't even come up with anybody within a 2-year time frame. You can't.
And I'm tripping and say that these people had to work together for a common purpose. Why none of these people work during the same time frame?
Why in the hell is it now, with all the sneaky shit that's been going on, that we ain't been a confirmation of herpes with this man or nothing? They still haven't confirmed it. Where the fuck is the records that says this man has herpes?
Hold on, watch this. Watch this right here, though.
Jury was entitled to infer that Kelly's inner circle, she observed her following all of the same rules as Kelly's other girlfriends. There's also testimony from Jane about Juice, who was another one of the defendant's girlfriends, but whom Jane testified acted as one of the defendant's assistants. Juice helped teach Jane rules, and Juice also knew Jane's age. I believe that's in the special, I believe that's SA 527. So this is all evidence that the jury was entitled to infer that Kelly's inner circle knew what was going on, that he was recruiting and maintaining underage women for sexual activity.
Does the, I guess the allegation that Kelly was also inducing these folks to come in violation of state law because he was infected, is there evidence that his entourage or the folks in the enterprise knew about Kelly's status as infected with herpes?
Yes, there is. There's testimony that his assistants picked up his Walgreens records. Anthony Navarro, who was one of the runners, testified that he would pick up Valtrex for Kelly. That's at A467 to 68. Diana Copeland accompanied Anna, who was one of the testifying victims at the trial, to the hospital for her STD test. And only Diana Copeland received the results of that test, not Anna. Juice, again, who Jane testified was like an assistant to Kelly, took
Was
Jane.
there evidence that the staff knew that Kelly wasn't disclosing his condition?
Well, a number of the women, in fact, obtained, got an STD. They were not just exposed to it, but they in fact got an STD.
But that doesn't go to the consent question. I mean, if they consented, then it wouldn't be a violation.
So she said a number of the women got this. So why only 2 women was granted restitution for having contracted this STD?
State law, right? If the girls had consented, knowing that he had herpes, that would not violate state law?
Well, the state law, I believe the state law, the violation is specifically exposing somebody to an STD. The jury was instructed that R. Kelly did not also give consent in those, that they did not give consent in those circumstances. So that was part of the jury
Right,
instructions.
but my question is, was there evidence that the staff knew that there was lack of consent?
Well, I don't think that there was direct testimony on that, but I do think that a jury, drawing all inferences in the government's favor, was entitled to infer that from the evidence that did exist. And again, just to complete the record on that, about the testimony by Jane about Juice, that Juice took Jane to see a doctor in downtown Chicago, and she was prescribed medication for her herpes infection. I also, though, want to talk about another illegal sexual activity for which there is tons of enterprise evidence that that Kelly has not really raised on appeal at all, and that is forced labor. That the defendant obtained labor and services here, sex acts, through threats of serious harm or physical restraint against the victims. And the evidence is replete with examples of how tightly tied the forced labor charges and the predicate acts were to the enterprise.
So I'm a little concerned about applying the forced labor statute in this context, because it seems that you run the risk of really sexualizing or federalizing all kinds of state sexual assault and being able to turn it into federal offenses with much different consequences for the individuals. Can you address that concern?
Yes, of course. And I would just return the court to the plain language of 18 U.S.C. section 1589A, which prohibits whoever knowingly provides or obtains the labor or services of a person by any number of combination of the then subsections of that, which includes a scheme, plan, or pattern intended to cause the person to believe that if the person did not perform that labor or services, the person or person would suffer serious harm or physical restraint.
So wouldn't that apply to any kind of rape prosecution?
So I don't think the court has to reach the outer boundaries of what the statute may or may not apply to in this case, because there was a clear pattern that was far beyond something like a one-time rape. So for the specific victims,
But in some cases, we are talking about just one or two instances, right?
Well, I don't think so. So as to Geronda, what was charged was a specific instance as to the forced labor. But of course, there was an entirety of the pattern that led up to that specific incident where he choked her, he spit on her, and then he made her perform oral sex on him. What led up to that was a whole series of Kelly enforcing his rules, teaching her the rules, enforcing the rules, and then punishing her.
So you think we should focus on the actions that constituted the force as opposed to the labor that was forced?
Well, I think as to labor and service, under this court's definitions of those recently in Ranieri and recently in Marcus, sexual activity, I think, clearly falls within the definition of the expenditure of physical or mental effort, especially when fatiguing, difficult, or compulsory, the performance of work commanded or paid for by another. And of course, in the context of prostitution, I think that the court would have no issue finding that that constitutes forced labor. And here, this is no different. A sex act is a sex act.
But what about a single one? What about a single rape?
Well, again, I don't think that the court has to reach the question of the sort of the outer boundaries of that question about a single rape. I guess what I would say is here, the conduct has met the elements of forced labor, and I think even the district court noted in its opinion that this was the kind of case where the defendant had a pattern in place of making these women feel isolated and ashamed, and he used the enterprise to make them feel like they were confined and that they had no way out. There was an expert who testified at trial as well about the defendant's use of these isolation.
Right, but the issue is the labor component,
Yeah.
it seems to me. So what does the isolation have to do with labor? That might all be true, but where is their labor?
Well, I am just pointing the court.
Now that's bias. If that's not bias, then you tell me what it is. You say, where's the issue? Then you say, well, it might all be true. where it might all be true, but where's the issue?
The forced labor. I mean, just if you cut it down the middle, let's just say it was true. Where's the forced labor?
Where is
it? If true or not, where's the forced labor? And then she gonna get in that bullshit again, and it just don't make sense.
So forced labor would be if this was her job and he forced her to do it, but she didn't receive any pay from it, or she lost out on wages to perform this act. So you're gonna provide a service for me that you normally get paid for, but you're gonna do it for free.
Right, and that service happened to be, it just happens to be. You feel me? That's crazy. Oh my goodness, boy! Wow.
To the other portion of Section 1589, addressing the court's question as to whether a single rape could constitute forced labor. I think here, sexual activity can constitute labor or services.
Right, we know that. Raniere says that. What about the facts here? This is very different than Raniere, right?
Well, I think in many ways it is similar. For example, the women were forced to give over collateral. Geronda, who was one of the victims of the forced labor charge, testified about how she had to write false letters. Faith also was forced to send a text
message. But is that the labor? So writing false letters is the labor?
No, the labor.
I mean, Raniere, these folks were doing other things. They were doing things for free, right? That would be easily described as labor. Some of it sexual, some of it not.
Well, again, I think that people pay money for work on websites. People pay money for transcribing tapes and reviewing articles, and people pay money for sex. So I think under the definition that this court has given in Raniere.
So any sex. So I think that's where we're back.
Hold on.
You keep saying.
Did she just say people pay money for sex? Isn't prostitution illegal? Oh, she's like people pay money for sex. Man, this woman's so serious, bro.
False letters is the labor?
No, the labor.
I mean, Raniere, these folks were doing other things. They were doing things for free, right? That would be easily described as labor. Some of it sexual, some of it not.
Well, again, I think that people pay money for work on websites. People pay money for transcribing tapes and reviewing articles, and people pay money for sex. So I think under the definition that
people pay money for sex, but they say prostitution is illegal. Oh shit.
This court has given in Raniere.
So I think that's where we're back again. You keep saying we don't need to go to the outer boundary, but it seems to me your argument is any sex acts, including a rape, is forced labor.
I believe that sexual activity does count under this court's definition of labor and service. And again, I would just note that, of course, the other provisions of the forced labor statute would also have to be met. And that may be where there's a limiting principle in terms of whether a single rape would constitute forced labor, because the whole other part of the statute would have to be met, which includes, as relevant to this case, the use of the means of any scheme, plan, or pattern intended to cause the person to believe that if they didn't perform the labor and services, that person or another person would suffer serious harm or physical restraint. And so that brings me back, I think, to sort of my initial point, which is, and I see that I'm over my time, so I can continue to address sort of the record evidence.
Please go ahead. There are a lot of issues here, so we may want to get to some others too.
Okay, so just very briefly, I think the record is replete with evidence that the enterprise was tightly tied to the facilitation of the forced labor predicate acts in this case. Members of the inner circle heard Kelly beating his girlfriends. They knew that Kelly was isolating his victims, and they helped him do it, including by enforcing his punishments, such as watching over them while they were confined to a bus for prolonged periods of time. There's testimony about that from the Mayweather sisters, from Diana Copeland, and employees were punished when they didn't comply. There were financial sanctions when they, for example, Copeland testified that she let Anna escape. And so I have numerous other examples of that, but if the court has questions about any of the other charges.
I'd like to ask about restitution.
Yes.
And about, it seemed to me that the record was weak, that Kelly infected Jane, and the second young woman with herpes in states where the exposure was illegal. And
y'all pay close attention to this part. Lock in on this part.
wondered if what the government's position is on that. If Kelly gained herpes in the state where the exposure was legal, someplace other than New York or California, do you agree that she would not be entitled to restitution?
Well, I think the record here establishes that the first time that Jane had sex with Kelly, so her first exposure to the STD was when she was in California.
Y'all, we gotta stop. We gotta stop. We gotta stop, Derek. We gotta stop.
Yeah, man, I'm right here with you on that one, bro. So what happened to the dolphin? What happened to the dolphin?
What happened to the Dolphin Hotel? What happened to the Dolphin Hotel? We need answers.
Yeah, that's missing. That's missing right there. See, that's when you got all of these people making, it's emotional. It's all emotional bullshit because when it's emotional, you everywhere. Oh, it happened here, it happened there. This is the first time we clearly know that nothing happened in the Dolphin, nothing happened in California. Because you've been out there with this man all of this time, you missed his shows, and you ain't gave him no Gucci. Do anybody remember that in the text messages?
I can help him. Hold on. So this is wild in California right here. You better stop you say you better stop taking shit for granted. That man just spent $20K or better on you, ain't get no coochie, and then you are not at his show. That's disrespectful. A slap in the face. Really, you better do some crocodile tears.
Oh man, I promise. Why we boy.
They've been sitting here arguing with us, talking about the man had sex with this woman at the Dolphin Hotel. Now, all of a sudden, this is from their government representative saying that the first time that she was exposed was in California.
And when you go to the transcripts, she's going to contradict that immediately.
Study line, man. This is why we have questions, bro. They talking about the Dolphin Hotel. The man was doing all this stuff. She said he was eating her, all this stuff. And then the knock on the door, she ran in the bathroom. He got dressed. When the police left, they finished X, Y, and Z. But the first time that she was exposed was in California.
How many times I got to tell people, man, that Dolphin Hotel episode in my brain never even happened. I'm talking about none of it. None of it. No, I'm talking about none of it. Because think about it. He didn't even want her to meet him there. He wanted her to meet her at a studio.
Right.
These people was insistent on the hotel simply for those facts. I'm probably compelled that they never made it out of the doggone Sprinter or the tour bus. If she met him up there in person at all.
Now people gonna this. But look, we've been sitting here debating about this Dolphin Hotel shit for 3-4 years.
I've said it never happened a long time ago, bro.
The first, according to them, her first
it never happened
was in California. But according to while in California, no sex never happened. According to the text messages, while in California, she said the man never came to the room.
Like I said, it's been lie after lie, and I've been yelling this for a minute. I think people then get mad at me. Never happened. It never happened. The Dolphin Hotel thing is a ruse. Reason why I know it's a ruse is because Angelo Clary got his ass up on Choke No Joke and said that they was peeling out of a parking lot with a tour bus and a Sprinter. Both impossible. Both of
And
them
not only
impossible.
that, if the Dolphin Hotel would have happened, Grady Judge would have had R. Kelly ass locked up, man.
Mm-hmm.
That man wouldn't discriminate because it was R. Kelly. He let it be known.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep going, man. Let's keep rolling, man. I'm not, man. These people out here, bro. Man, look here, man.
Testimony about that from the Mayweather sisters, from Diana Copeland, and employees were punished when they didn't comply. There were financial sanctions when they, for example, Copeland testified that she let Anna escape. And so I have numerous other examples of that, but if the court has questions about any of the other charges.
I'd like to ask about restitution.
Yes.
And about, it seemed to me that the record was weak, that Kelly infected Jane and the second young woman with herpes in states where the exposure was illegal. And I wondered if what the government's position is on that. If Kelly gave Jane herpes in the state where the exposure was legal, someplace other than New York or California, do you agree that she would not be entitled to restitution?
Well, I think the record here establishes that the first time that Jane had sex with Kelly, so her first exposure to the STD was when she was in California. And that was the basis for that particular racketeering act. And for the...
Man, these people, man, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. I thought I was going to be able to let that part play by again.
Shawty don't know what she's talking about, bro.
I can't.
Shawty don't know what she's talking about. You can hear it in her voice.
I'm happy she said it, though, because it contradicts their goddamn argument. They using this Dolphin Hotel shit. They the one mentioned this shit in the transcript. Now you done went from the Dolphin Hotel to California. So what help us understand, they don't even know what the fuck they talking about.
Shawty confused.
They going based off of what somebody said.
Shawty clearly confused, man. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And then you start popping off with these names of people who wasn't charged. It was, his workers, and Diane Copeland didn't say nothing negative about that man. And when you do wrong, your job ain't supposed to be no fucking consequences. Interesting.
Johnny, let's go with it, man.
To ask about restitution.
Yes.
And about, it seemed to me that the record was weak, that Kelly infected Jane and the second young woman with herpes in states where the exposure was illegal. And I wondered if what the government's position is on that. If Kelly gave Jane herpes in the state where the exposure was legal, someplace other than New York or California, do you agree that she would not be entitled to restitution?
Well, I think the record here establishes that the first time that Jane had sex with Kelly, so her first exposure to the STD was when she was in California. And that was the basis for that particular racketeering act and for the charge as well. And so that was the first time that she was exposed. She subsequently later that summer tested positive for having herpes. And so I think that the record has demonstrated that the crime was exposing her to herpes, and there's direct causation that she then later contracted herpes. And just to close the gap, she also testified that she had not been with any other sexual partners at that time. Mm-hmm. So I think here we do
and don't we know that, didn't we understand that AZ was already sexually active before she met Rock?
Right. And people don't even understand the fact that herpes is about flare-ups. She could have had that shit before she ever met the man.
This is from her father. She was already fucking before she met Robert. She wasn't a virgin when she met him. Let's go, bro.
Direct and proximate causation, and of course, the district court had the facts to make that determination. And as to Stephanie. So she had filed, I believe she'd filed a letter with the district court indicating that the defendant had exposed her with herpes, and that was part of the sentencing record. But in addition, the government had referenced a report of investigation, an interview that she had given to HSI agents that during the time that she was with Kelly, he never wore a condom.
Yeah, let me go back. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes.
Yes.
But wasn't by the time that Kelly met Jane, wasn't he on Valtrex by then?
So the testimony was that, first of all, herpes can be transmitted even while you are taking Valtrex.
Ruby Lockett, the Dolphin Hotel is in Florida.
That was part of the expert's testimony in this case. And there was also testimony that his use of Valtrex was very inconsistent. So there's testimony from his doctor that the doctor would prescribe 11 months of Valtrex, and then 4 months later, he'd have to be prescribing more Valtrex. So I think there's testimony from which the district court could conclude that he was not taking Valtrex as it was prescribed, which simply increases even more the risk that he could transmit herpes to
And this
Jane.
is applying a preponderance standard.
Hey, Big Vi, check this out. Ain't no way in the world. If he was not taking it properly and not taking it enough, he wouldn't be coming back every 4 months. What that constitutes is he may be taking too much, if that's the case.
Right.
So I'm like, that argument makes no sense. It's like, okay, if he wasn't taking it, that's just like me. If I get blood pressure pills for a year and I'm not taking them properly, which means that I'm forgetting to take them, I'm not taking them at all, then I'm going to end up coming back. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to end up coming back because I'm going to have them in my cabinet. But if I'm taking 3 and 4 of them a day, then yeah, I'm going to show up again. That's like people with painkillers. You know, you can't. So they're saying you could over medicate yourself with Valtrex and reverse the effects. Is that what you're saying? That's crazy, man. She don't know what the fuck she's talking about, man. I'm telling you, she's just talking. You keep going.
All right.
Exactly, of course, Your Honor.
Okay. So if you could address Stephanie now.
Yes, thank you so much. So, so in this report of investigation from HSI, which the government referenced in its letter seeking restitution for Stephanie, we represented that the only person that she was with was Kelly at that time, and that was in 1999. Of course, in 2000, Kelly did have a negative culture for herpes, but there was testimony from both his doctor and the expert witness in this case that it is actually quite frequent that you might get a negative culture even when you have herpes, because the timing of that test.
And there was evidence that she was having sexual relations with no one else?
Correct. That was part of the report of investigation that the district court had before it. There was a specific 3500 piece that was referenced.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask you, I guess, to come back to what I think is a legal point? Do you agree with Ms. Bonjean that there has to be an illegal purpose in order to establish an enterprise, which is really the first element of the RICO claim?
No, I think as we have made very clear in our brief, that is nowhere in the text of the statute, that is nowhere in the Supreme Court's precedent, and in fact, there is precedent in this circuit that does not require any sort of illegal common purpose, and specifically the court's
A
opinion in
precedence
Dario,
y'all
but also
set.
a recent summary order in this circuit in the Raniere case. In that case, there was a completely legal common purpose that was alleged, and this court found that that was completely sufficient.
Right, and then I guess the next question is that I think Ms. Bonjean's argument is that when you've decided to charge an enterprise with a list or a series of purposes, her view is you have to prove them all beyond a reasonable doubt, or you haven't proved the enterprise in question.
Well, the jury instructions, in fact, stated that the government is not required to prove each and every allegation about the enterprise or the manner in which the enterprise operated. The enterprise must be essentially the one that was alleged in the indictment. And for all of the reasons I started with today, the enterprise was the one that was alleged.
Well, I guess that's the question. Is it essentially the one charged in the indictment if the jury only finds 3 of the 4 purposes proven beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes, I absolutely think that it is. It's not like there's some sort of unfair surprise that R. Kelly's enterprise was.
It goes back to that and or. So when they put these charges in, they telling the jury, you gotta find him guilty on all counts 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 to find him guilty, or they use the word or. You find him guilty on count 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, then we can find the defendant guilty. So this is when you get to the changing of the language and or.
Oh, that's right.
As the Gambino crime family. I think no, I think as we have made very clear in our brief, that is nowhere in the text of the statute, that is nowhere in the Supreme Court's precedent, and in fact, there is precedent in this circuit that does not require any sort of illegal common purpose, and specifically the court's opinion in Dario, but also a recent summary order in this circuit in the Raniere case. In that case, there was a completely legal common purpose that was alleged, and this court found that that was completely sufficient.
Right, and then I guess the next question is that I think Ms. Bonjean's argument is that when you've decided to charge an enterprise with a list or a series of purposes, her view is you have to prove them all beyond a reasonable doubt, or you haven't proved the enterprise in question.
Well, the jury instructions, in fact, stated that the government is not required to prove each and every allegation about the enterprise or the manner in which the enterprise operated. The enterprise must be essentially the one that was alleged in the indictment. And for all of the reasons I started with today, the enterprise was the one that was alleged.
Well, I guess that's the question. Is it essentially the one charged in the indictment if the jury only finds 3 of the 4 purposes proven beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes, I absolutely think that it is. It's not like there's some sort of unfair surprise that R. Kelly's enterprise was the Gambino crime family. I think if the court looks at the definition of the enterprise in the indictment, the means and the methods used by the enterprise, those were proved by the government at trial. And so I think that there is
I think it will be reversed. Simply, I mean, if you look at the things that they didn't talk about today, if you look at the jury, when you got 6 people on a jury that should have been disqualified, that alone is enough to for a new trial at least. When you got 4 people that's on your jury who has watched Surviving R.KELLY, you got another 2 people who was familiar with the accusations of Mr. Kelly's past. These points that they're arguing today, I mean, they okay, but it's a lot of more things that went on in this trial that when these judges get a hold to this when they get to that point in the paperwork, it's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be brought to light. But just on the jury alone, the prosecutor, the government, they knew those jurors shouldn't have been on that jury panel, especially after admitting to have watched Surviving R.KELLY. And all of that is in Jennifer's paperwork. All of that is on record.
Sort of no way on this record, and I can continue to go through the various factual allegations if the court was like, but I would also reference the court to the district court's very thorough opinion in this case as a place to look for the evidence of the enterprise, which was one I think that was alleged in the indictment. So I think under the factual record, there can be no doubt that the government proved that the enterprise was essentially the one alleged in the indictment.
Right, and nobody asked for a special verdict form that would have the jury identify which purposes were proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Nor that's of course true, and I think that this argument has been thoroughly waived, including by the statements today that the jury instructions were appropriate under both parties' position. But also I think we're talking about the existence of an enterprise, and a common purpose is sort of one sub element of what constitutes an association in fact enterprise. So I don't think that there need to be any sort of special verdict as to which common purpose was proved.
You mean if they all thought that what they were doing was just promoting his brand and music, that the illegal purposes would be irrelevant to the enterprise?
Well, again, in Ranieri, there was a very similar common purpose that was alleged. It was to promote Ranieri and to recruit new members into the pyramid organizations. That was the common purpose that was alleged, and this court found that that was sufficient. Now here, the government alleged additional common purposes, and the government continues to submit that the proof at trial was overwhelming, and certainly that the jury's verdict should be credited.
The criminality is picked up by the pattern of conduct.
Correct, and also the required nexus between the person acting through the enterprise to commit a pattern of racketeering activity.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Benson, we'll hear now from Ms. Bonjean for 3 minutes of rebuttal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll start really briefly with the forced labor issue. Forced labor counts were based on a single act in both cases, Jahanda, an act of oral sex, and in Faith, an act of oral sex. I know the government, again, keeps referring to all of the enterprise activity the activity that they allege is enterprise activity. But at the end of the day, those forced labor counts were premised on a single act. Unless the court is prepared to say that a single act of oral sex, even if it's forced, frankly, constitutes forced labor, that is just making federal law coextensive with state law. And that is one of the problems with that argument, which we did raise in our opening brief. The government is taking the position that a RICO enterprise need not be rooted in criminality. That is what they are saying. And that is a new position that frankly is unique and not really supported, including by D'Addario, where D'Addario.
Well, in D'Addario, there was an estate that had to be administered, and there was nothing inherently illegal about that, right?
No, but the court in Daddario did say, in the context of after finding the estate to be an appropriate structure, the exact language was, Daddario found that the individual defendants were alleged to assist the executor of the estate to effectuate his schemes. It was a state that effectuated schemes, an estate that engaged in criminal activity. It was a state that engaged in illicit activity. And so what the government is saying is, in this case, if we merely charged the defendant with an enterprise that's common purpose was simply to promote his music, that would have been A-okay. But I think that is...
But why is that wrong if the government also has to prove a pattern of criminal activity, racketeering activity, and a nexus?
Well, I think in Boyle, the United States...
In other words, the RICO is looking at organizations that are then used to commit criminal acts. And it doesn't have to be a criminal organization. It could be a completely legitimate organization. But if it engages in racketeering activity, then it violates RICO.
Yes, but first of all, if you look at the racketeering acts, it's defendant Kelly's acts. Those are the acts that are charged. There are no acts except perhaps, I guess we could make an argument about Demetrius Smith's conduct after after he learned that there was illegal activity occurring with Aaliyah, allegedly. He's a little much of an outsider, but overwhelmingly, and I think all of the racketeering acts involved the victims and defendant, not the enterprise, the alleged enterprise.
But I think you're conflating the fifth and the first elements of a RICO claim. The first is just the existence of an enterprise. It can be a labor union, right?
Again, Your Honor, I'm not talking about the ascertainable structure. I'm talking about the structure.
I'm not talking about the
has...
ascertainable structure either. I'm talking about the legal entity of a labor union is sufficient.
I don't know, the way he was talking to Jennifer, I don't know, man. This dude, I don't know, man. The way he was talking, like, all aggressive and shit, like, I don't know, bro. I don't know, man. He all aggressive and shit. You know what I'm saying? What your draws, what your pennies in a bunch for?
Agreed.
For enterprise.
Agreed. It still has after after he learned that there was illegal activity occurring with Aaliyah, allegedly. He's a little much of an outsider, but overwhelmingly, and I think all of the racketeering acts involved the victims and defendant, not the enterprise, the alleged enterprise.
But I think you're conflating the fifth and the first elements of a RICO claim. The first is just the existence of an enterprise. It can be a labor union, right?
Again, Your Honor, I'm not talking about the ascertainable structure. I'm talking about the structure.
I'm not talking about the
has...
ascertainable structure either. I'm talking about the legal entity of a labor union is sufficient for enterprise.
Agreed. It still has to have a purpose.
The fifth element is that the defendant conducted or participated in the conduct of the enterprise through his previously established pattern of racketeering activity. So it has to be a link between what the defendant is doing as a pattern of racketeering activity and the conduct of the enterprise. That's the last element. You seem to be flipping that into the enterprise, and I think that's where you're getting confused.
I don't believe I am. I think the United States Supreme Court in Boyle made it very clear that an enterprise has to be more than just the pattern of racketeering. It has to be.
Yes, it has to. Yes, an enterprise has to be demonstrated. An enterprise is defined as an entity, legal or not legal, that has purpose, structure, and form.
Right, and one
history.
I'm sorry.
And history.
Yes, and one of the elements of the structure for an association, in fact, enterprise is a common purpose.
Right, but not an illegal common purpose.
Well, I mean, then we are. Again, this is a new approach that would.
I don't think so. I mean, again, you didn't object to the jury instructions.
I didn't try. I didn't represent Mr. Kelly at trial.
No, I mean,
point out.
not you personally, right?
How's she gonna object to the jury instruction if she wasn't the lawyer during the time? Fucking asshole, bro.
It has to
yes,
be.
it has to. Yes, an enterprise has to be demonstrated. An enterprise is defined as an entity, legal or not legal, that has purpose, structure, and form.
Right, and one
history.
I'm sorry.
And history.
Yes, and one of the elements of the structure for an association, in fact, enterprise is a common purpose.
Right, but not
Right.
an illegal common purpose.
Well, I mean, then we are, then, I mean, again, this is a new approach that
Oh,
would,
I don't think so. I mean, again, you didn't object to the jury instructions.
I
so don't
didn't
see how-
try, I didn't represent Mr. Kelly at trial.
No, I
will
mean,
point out.
not
but-
you personally, right?
But let me put, but I think that that would have been a frivolous objection when every single, including the United States Supreme Court, has said these exact instructions are proper. What has never come up, and because the government has extended the RICO statute to a set of circumstances that's so beyond what the framers intended, which was to get at organized crime. And now we're talking about an organization with an alleged criminal, but not organized crime. And it is not enough simply.
Keeping it real with Kiki, Jennifer did file. She did file for ineffective counsel as well. That's why what we're hearing is just the gist of the paperwork that Jennifer put in for ineffective counsel. She put in for ineffective counsel. She put in for bad act witnesses. She put in for conflict. A conflict of interest with one of the lawyers at the time, Nicole Becker and Jane Doe number 5. And these were motions that Jennifer put in that were denied by Jennifer Bonjean. Jennifer Bonjean denied, and the Second Circuit picked it up. So when they able to go over all of this information that Jennifer Bonjean did bring to Ann Donnelly's attention, then we're gonna see this thing start to go in a totally different direction.
Simply that there be a pattern of racketeering that satisfies the enterprise. There has to be something more. The pattern of racketeering can be proof of the enterprise, but it cannot simply be the only evidence of the enterprise. And I think if the court looks at the evidence closely, the government conflates a lot of the evidence that came in, but at the end of the day, we are talking about, in a couple instances, some of these victims that testified were very clear that no one asked me my age. And if you're 17 years old in the state of Illinois, would not necessarily put anyone on notice that what's going to happen is illegal. It's preposterous to suggest that because a runner goes and picks up a famous person's medicine, that puts them on notice that Mr. Kelly is exposing and giving STDs to his partners. And for example, Cheryl Mack, as an example, she testified very clearly that when she saw some inappropriate conduct with Jane, she quit the next day. That is not evidence that she came together to participate in recruiting girls or producing child pornography. That's evidence that, whoa, this is not what I would approve of, and I'm out of here. So this shows that this was not a collection of people who had a purpose to recruit girls for sexual abuse or for child pornography. Whether they turned a blind eye, whether some of them suspected that some of these girls were underage, that's a whole different matter. And once we get into that sort of territory, we're going to say that constitutes a RICO enterprise. Well, we have a lot of organizations, we have a lot of frat houses, we have all types of organizations that are now going to become RICO enterprises. And that has not been the case. Frankly, if that was the case, it's unclear why Bernie Madoff wasn't prosecuted under a RICO theory, because he certainly was using the machinery of his organization to carry out a RICO enterprise, and yet he wasn't. So I think—
Well, he got 150 years. I don't know that it mattered, but I mean, I guess—
Agreed, but I think that I think if you look really closely at the law, these are all cases where it was assumed absolutely the RICO enterprise was criminal or illicit in nature. It would be contrary to the purpose of the statute. Now, I agree that
the standard instruction from SAND, which is generally what we look to in this circuit, says an enterprise includes any legal entity such as a partnership, corporation, or association. And then it goes on to describe non-legal entities that may also meet the definition. So your view is that that's a wrong instruction?
My view is that, my view is this, that the instruction was proper in accordance with the way that instruction has been given throughout history in this district and the United States Supreme Court in Boyle. What is problematic is that it is clear that the heart of the purpose of this was illegal activity. That's what was charged. None of this evidence really went to promoting his brand or his music. All of the government's evidence allegedly went towards his illegal activity. So it's kind of disingenuous to say now, oh, well, we just needed to, there needs to be no nexus. We can just say that this was an organization that was out there promoting his music. And oh, by the way, there were, we can call it a RICO enterprise so long as Mr. Kelly is doing these criminal activities and relying on his, again, underlings, whether they know it or not, to facilitate it. And that, I think, is not what was contemplated by the framers of this statute.
All right. Well, thank you both.
Thank
We
you.
will reserve decision. That concludes the arguments on our argument calendar. We will also reserve the two that have been put on submission. And with that, I'll ask Ms. Beard to adjourn court.
Yo, okay, so, we got the call-in number. We got the call-in number today. Yeah. We got the call-in number. Also, what up, Midas? Yeah, but Jennifer, she challenged a lot of different things. And let me see, I want my friend Keeping It Real with Kiki. I think if you go to A View from Tracy Point, she's doing the breakdown of the information that Jennifer Bunjean filed to the Court of Appeals. And when you go on her page, she have her recent videos as of a few days ago. She's doing the breakdown of everything that Jennifer filed as far as R. Kelly New York appeal. And you will see all of the different, she's going to talk about all the different things that Jennifer pointed out in her paperwork for the appeal. Yeah, you guys, man, I hope y'all having a blessed day out there, man. And like we caught what they said. We caught what she said as far as some of the things the prosecution was saying. So what I want to do, I want to have a listen at this enterprise who they say work together.
One, Demetrius Smith. Demetrius Smith, friend and personal assistant for the defendant with 1984 to 1994. Smith met defendant as a teenager when he was still attending high school and singing in subways in the mid-1980s. Smith was first a friend and mentor to the defendant and then began working as his personal assistant when defendant received his first record deal in 1988 or 1989. Smith worked off and on for defendant as a personal assistant until around 1994. Smith's responsibilities included assisting the defendant in things he needed and with scheduling. Smith testified that defendant met Aaliyah through his manager, Barry Hankerson, who was Aaliyah's uncle. Smith testified that from his perspective, their relationship was strictly about music and that he never saw defendant take Aaliyah out by herself. Smith did concede there were short periods of time when defendant might be alone with Aaliyah. There were times when he thought defendant and Aaliyah were overly playful or too friendly, and he asked defendant if he was messing
keeping it real. Ineffective counsel is an argument in Jennifer Bungine paperwork. That's why I'm saying you, if you want to get the paperwork, you can go over to Justice for RK on Instagram, and you can get the paperwork from Jennifer Bungine filed with the appeal courts. Ineffective counsel is it is in the paperwork. But today, this hearing was more so about questions that the Second Circuit had raised with Bungine and the government. This little brief was only, it was only so much that they could talk about. And those questions were instructed to Bungine and the government by the judges of appeal. But that ineffective counsel that you are talking about, it was filed and it was denied by Ann Donnelly. And Jennifer took the same paperwork and put it into the courts of appeal. But let's finish listening to chapter 7.
with Aaliyah, to which defendant always responded no. Smith raised those concerns a few times, but only learned that the relationship was more than platonic in 1994. Number 2, Anthony Navarro. Anthony Navarro worked as a sound engineer in defendant's studio for 2.5 years. Navarro understood it was entry-level position, and
y'all remember Anthony Navarro. This is Anthony Navarro.
And would include such duties as cleaning, doing food runs, and driving guests around. Navarro testified that numerous people came through the studio, including different girlfriends of the defendant. One of his responsibilities was to drive the girlfriends where they needed to go. He was instructed not to speak with defendant's guests. Navarro explained that defendant's guests were generally required to ask permission if they wanted things or wanted to order food, and they were not permitted to wander the studio or defendant's home unaccompanied. Sometimes these guests would stay at the studio for
what was argued and presented. Everything that Jennifer has submitted to these people, the court, they're going to go over all of these documents that were submitted. The appellate court, they had the questions. They instructed the questions. I can't explain it enough, but I'm telling you, this page here that I'm on, R.KELLY, this page, A View from Tracy's Point. If you go to this page, and she's gonna read the documents that were submitted to the Second Circuit Court. If you want the documents for yourself that was submitted to the Second Circuit Court, you can go to Justice for RK, and all of the documents are there as well. But it was way more issue. 15 minutes is not enough time to address 7 or 8 different issues. We didn't hear her talk about the jurors. We didn't hear her talk about the BOP officer who gave Mr. Kelly jail records and somehow got in the hands of the star witness in the case. We didn't hear them talk about none of that today. Pretty much they only talked about the RICO. They only talked about Jennifer Bungine also challenging the one-man RICO. Pretty much that was the whole thing about today, the RICO challenge.
For an extended period of time, but could leave if they wanted to. Navarro did not know the details of why any female guests visited. Oops, click too many times. Let's get back up here. Okay. Navarro never picked up female guests who appeared to be underage. They appeared to be around his age, in their early 20s. Navarro had never seen defendant engaging in sexual activity in his home or in his studio. Navarro went on tour with the defendant and observed that invites would be distributed to attendees for after parties. Sometimes defendant's phone number would be on the invites. At times, he would see defendant's phone number distributed to people at the mall or at a restaurant. Navarro never saw underage girls backstage. Navarro recalled that identifications were checked before people could go backstage, but he could not recall whether people had to be 18 or 21. 3. Tom Arnold, runner studio manager from 1998 to 2011. Oh, let me go back up because I don't think I read. Anthony Navarro was a runner and sound engineer from 2007 to 2009. Okay. So Tom Arnold, runner studio manager from 1998 to 2011. Tom Arnold worked for defendant from 1998 to 2011. He started as a runner and eventually became his studio manager and road manager. One of Arnold's responsibilities working for defendant was to provide transportation to his guests, which could include men with whom defendant played basketball, a musician, and his female guests. If defendant wanted Arnold to transport a guest somewhere, defendant would tell him directly, or someone with defendant would make the request. Arnold testified that the protocol for driving guests from one location to another was to open the door for them, turn the rearview mirror up, and then turn the radio on to a reasonable volume. Arnold understood that turning the rearview mirror up was to avoid eye contact with defendant's female guests and to ensure their privacy. Guests at the studio were required to sign confidentiality agreements that prohibited guests from recording or taking photographs. Staff would either take Polaroid photos of guests or copy their identification to confirm the identity of the person signing the confidentiality agreement. Okay, the policy of having studio guests sign that a jury returned a verdict finding defendant guilty of all charges in the government's third superseding indictment on September 27th, 2021. Defendant was, well, let's stop there because he wasn't found guilty on all charges. They found him not guilty, I thought, when it came to the Sonia chick, who was the intern at a radio station who claimed that she met him, I believe, at the mall or something. He was getting on the tour bus, and somehow she made it from Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, all the way to Chicago. Child, I don't think he paid for nail ticket, but she made her way to Chicago and claimed that she was locked in a room in his studio and some stuff took place, but the jury did not buy it. They said, no, girl, get on out of here with that, because that is not. And I thought it was interesting because her charge was more along the assault angle of everything, and she was the only one who said that they were assaulted. Everybody else, it was, like the Mann Act and what else, but she was actually trying to go with the R word, and the jury was not having that. They did not believe her. It says defendant was sentenced to a term of 30 years imprisonment on June 29th, 2022, and judgment was entered on, one day later, June 30th, 2022. Sorry about that. A timely notice of appeal was filed on July 22nd, 2022, after a subsequent restitution hearing held on September 28, 2022. The district court entered a restitution order on November 8th, 2022. Defendant filed an amended notice of appeal on November 22nd, 2022. An amended judgment was entered on December 7th, 2022. On September 9th, 2022, the district court judge entered an order directing the Bureau of Prisons to turn over monies it seized from defendants' inmate trust account to the clerk of the court. Defendant filed a notice of appeal from that order on September 9th, 2022. The United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has jurisdiction over these matters pursuant to 28 United States Code, Section 1291. So then she moves on to issues presented for review. 1. Whether the government failed to prove defendant guilty of racketeering where the record is devoid of evidence of an enterprise comprised of members who shared a common illegal or fraudulent purpose, and where the defendant and the alleged enterprise were indistinct. 2. Whether the government failed to prove defendant guilty of violating the Mann Act as to who was Jane, that was Azriel. 3. Whether the government failed to prove defendant guilty of violating the Mann Act as to Faith. And 4, whether New York Public Health Law, Section 2307, is unconstitutionally vague, such that defendants' Mann Act convictions predicated on that law must be vacated. 5, whether defendants' Mann Act convictions predicated on a violation of California Health and Safety Code, Section 12290, must be vacated because the government charged defendant with a repealed version of the statute that was unconstitutionally vague. 6, whether the government failed to prove defendant guilty of forced labor of Geronda and Faith based on an isolated sex act that did not constitute labor of service and that neither victim alleged was forced. Okay, now 7, whether defendant was denied a fair and impartial jury where 4 of the seated jurors admitted that they prejudged the defendant's guilt and trial counsel provided ineffective assistance of counsel when he failed to move to disqualify the patently unqualified jurors or otherwise conduct a meaningful voir dire of prospective jurors. 8, whether defendant was denied a fair trial where the government swamped the jury with excessive other bad act evidence, including testimony from 7 additional witnesses who detailed defendant's unusual and graphic sexual activities, his history of transmitting herpes to his sex partners, his abusive behavior towards his girlfriends, and both audio and video recordings of this conduct with women and men, some of whom never testified. Now, I'm glad she brought that out because I just thought it was so crazy. Because I think the one video was with Dominique. Dominique was in the video, and then it was something with Lisa Van Allen. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're not even here to testify to give context to what these videos are really about or what was really happening. So why were they even allowed to be a part of the trial? So 9, whether the district court's restitution award for Jane and Stephanie's herpes treatment was unsupported by the government's evidence. Right, because did they bring in some doctor's notes? Did they bring in some prescriptions for the date that they were diagnosed with herpes up until, through the years? How are you just going to give people money for something that they didn't even prove that they actually had. And then, even if they do have it, how do you know he was the one that gave it to them? Because for all we know, Stephanie, that was back from 1999. And so if she was diagnosed, maybe she was diagnosed in 2000 and something. How do you know one of her sexual partners between 1999 and when she was actually diagnosed didn't give her the disease? Like, it's just crazy what they allowed during that trial. Number 10, whether the district court lacked authority to order the BOP to turn over money seized from the defendant's trust fund account to the clerk of the court for future restitution payments. So next we have the statement of case. The defendant is an internationally renowned recording artist, was charged with leading a racketeer, influence, and corrupt organization, RICO, enterprise between 1994 and 2018, comprised of individuals whose objective was to promote defendant's music and to recruit women and girls in illegal activity with defendant and to produce porn and CP. And you guys know what I'm talking about. Defendant was separately charged with various Mann Act violations stemming from conduct in 2015 related to Azriel and 2018 related to Faith. After a 6-week jury trial, defendant was convicted of all counts of the third superseding indictment. He was later sentenced to 30 years imprisonment. Through new counsel, defendant filed extensive post-trial motions pursuant to federal rules of criminal procedure 29 and 33 that were denied by the district court in a 103-page memorandum decision and order. Not that Ann Donnelly sat there and typed up 103 pages, and I'm sure I read every last one of them to you guys. But just like on the back end to be like, oh yeah, she was serious, child. She had it out for Mr. Kelly, and she just really thought that she was dotting all her I's and crossing all of her T's with her opinion. Okay. And well, we know she didn't write it, but she had them law clerks writing it. So defendant includes a concise statement of the case setting out the facts relevant to the issues raised in this brief, and also refers this court to the district court's detailed factual background presented in the light most favorable to the government contained in its order. So a pretrial motion. But before we get to that, we have a note at the bottom of this page, and the note says on September 14, 2022, defendant was convicted in the Northern District of Illinois with 3 counts of production of CP and 3 enticement counts. He was acquitted of obstruction of justice, receiving CP, and 2 enticement counts. Defendant was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, ordered to run concurrent to the sentence in the instant case, with the exception of 1 year, which was ordered to run consecutive. All charges brought by the state of Illinois were subsequently dismissed. So we pick back up and it says defendant unsuccessfully moved to dismiss the RICO count pre-trial, arguing that the government failed to sufficiently plead a RICO enterprise. Defendant also moved to dismiss as unconstitutional those Mann Act charges premised on a violation of New York Public Health Law, Section 2307. The district court denied the motion in a written order. On July 23, 2021, the government filed a 55-page motion seeking to admit extensive prior bad act evidence. On July 30th, 2021, defense counsel filed a written objection to the government's motion and filed a supplemental response on August 6, 2021. The district court issued a ruling from the bench, followed by a written order largely granting the government's motion. Throughout trial, defense counsel asked the court to reconsider some of its rulings regarding the admission of other bad act evidence, mostly unsuccessful. And for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, who are just tuning in because this popped up on your feed, I have a whole, actually, I turned it into a podcast. YouTube told me to take my playlist on this R. Kelly trial and turn it into a podcast. And that's what I did. So if you want to get caught up on some of the videos that I've done, because on this channel, we basically read the documents and then I might interject, some little comments or thoughts. But for the most part, we are bringing you the actual, we are 100% bringing you the actual and factual information as it is presented in the court documents. But I might sprinkle in, a little bit of commentary. But you can follow this case along pretty well from my videos, I think. And I do have some videos that are not in that playlist. So if you're looking through the playlist and you can't find something that I mentioned in here, then go over to my community page, look up videos and scroll that way. And I think that I'm pretty descriptive about what I'm talking about in the title of my videos. And then when I have some more time, I'll add those additional videos to that playlist. And I just thought it was so interesting when I turned the playlist into the podcast, how many people started watching those videos. So I was like, well, thank you, YouTube. And so we will get the full podcast, the full length of videos into that podcast for people that just want to follow along at a later date. Okay, guys, so that was the introduction into the case. And the next video is going to pick up on her arguments about the jury selection. And as you guys know, I believe there were like 4 people that were on the jury that had actually watched Surviving R. Kelly and had already decided in their minds that they thought he was guilty based on that documentary. So Jennifer Bonjean will get into those arguments in our next video. So go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye. Appeal, which took about 4 hours. But also, when General Court directed the parties to submit a joint proposed jury questionnaire to be completed by prospective jurors, the parties reviewed the questionnaires to determine whether they could agree to the dismissal of some jurors for cause. The district court conducted an oral voir dire as to the remaining prospective jurors, affording the parties the opportunity to submit additional questions to probe their qualifications to serve as jurors. Numerous seated jurors were either familiar with accusations that defendant had a history of sexually abusing individuals, had previously faced legal problems, and or had seen the highly unflattering docuseries Surviving Lives, in which several government witnesses had appeared. Defense counsel did move to disqualify jurors who admitted they had prejudged defendant's guilt or had gathered knowledge about the case for other sources. Let's go into this. It says defendant was denied effective assistance of counsel where his trial attorneys failed to conduct a meaningful voir dire of potential jurors and challenge unqualified jurors, some of whom had watched the inflammatory docuseries.
So some people was questioning if Jennifer challenged the ineffective counsel of she did challenge, she did raise that to the court, the ineffective counsel, and it was, pertaining to the jury selection and other things.
Go into this. It says defendant was denied effective assistance of counsel where his trial attorneys failed to conduct a meaningful voir dire of potential jurors and challenge unqualified jurors, some of whom had watched the inflammatory docuseries Surviving R. Kelly or were familiar with prior accusations of sexual abuse of minors against the defendant. Counsel's objectively unreasonable performance during voir dire resulted in the impaneling of a jury that was neither fair nor impartial in violation of defendant's due process guarantees. And voir dire is the process where if you've ever been called on jury selection, remember you go in, you sit in this room, and then they ask you some questions, and then they bring people in groups and ask some more questions, and then they narrow it down to a select group of people, you know, who could potentially sit on the jury, and then the prosecution and the defense have the opportunity to ask you questions to see if you will be fair in hearing the case. And if they don't think you'll be fair, they do what's called a strike. And they get, depending on the type of trial, they can get like 3 to 6 strikes where they can say, okay, I don't want this person on the jury. Where leading up to Mr. Kelly's case, they had hundreds of people who were sent questionnaires. And then from those questionnaires, they got rid of hundreds of people. And then when it finally came down to jury selection, they had a set number of people. I don't want to throw numbers out there because I don't have the document here with me, but they had a set number of people that they were going to consider for the trial. And then they did their strikes, and they didn't even go through all the final people because I reported to you guys, I believe they were down to like 50 people, and they were like, oh, you know, we should get through this by the end of the day. And then it was a couple of hours later, they said, okay, well, they've sat the jury. And so a lot of people they didn't even get to go through the full process because they chose their 12 jurors and like 6 alternates and kept it moving. So we don't even know who those other people were that didn't even get through the final process. So in any event, it says the government defends trial counsel's performance during voir dire, claiming that defendants' complaints are vague and belied by the record. Specifically, the government vouches for counsel's performance, arguing that trial counsel actively participated in voir dire. The fact that defense counsel participated in voir dire does not mean that his performance was objectively reasonable, where he agreed to the seating of multiple jurors who, 1, had seen Surviving R. Kelly, 2, were aware of defendant's reputation that he quote unquote loves little girls, and 3, were familiar with his prior legal troubles, including his criminal prosecution for creating sexually explicit videos with a minor.
For everyone who want to go and finish listening to the layout, the foundations of Jennifer appeal, head over here to A View from Tracy Point. She uploaded about 5 to 6 videos. She got about 5 to 6 videos that's uploaded over there, going over everything that Jennifer Bunjean has laid out in her argument. Um, we did an overview of today's oral arguments and did a little bit of conversation here and there. But for everyone, um, who's sharing the video, make sure don't y'all share the first video from this morning. Um, Share that video so people can hear the argument throughout without any interjections or any interruptions. Send them the link or share the link from the earlier video when we played the brief with no interruption, and then we can also share this video secondly. But thanks for everybody that came over and watched the live this evening. um it was a great live. We was able to stop and point out certain things that were questionable to us, and also we was able to kind of look at certain things as a group. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody coming over and joining in and checking out the live today. Most definitely appreciate it. Also, I told you guys I put up the call-in number. Let me see. About 6:30. I got 15 minutes, to take some calls. If anybody would like to call in, I got about 15 minutes to take calls, and to give your opinion on what you saw today, or say how you feel today, or to encourage Jennifer Bunjean, or whatever the situation may be. So you got about 15 minutes of. Don't nobody been called in within the next 5 minutes. We gonna get ready to get up out of here. So yeah, man. What's up, though, Midas? What's been going on with your Midas? We are planning another 24-hour live. We most definitely planning another 24-hour live. I just gotta figure out when it's gonna be. Yep. Yeah, it's on the stream right here under my name. The call-in number is on the screen right here under my name. Oh hell, man! How's it going?
Doing great. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. I'm from Louisiana myself.
from here. I'm originally from New York.
Okay.
I've been living in New Orleans for like, I guess, 8 or 9 years. So I guess I'm from New Orleans.
Oh yeah, not bad. What you think? What you got on your mind today?
Well, first off, I'm a huge R.KELLY fan. I think I was from my parents, but I've been following the case from like day one because honestly, when I was in college, my friends, we talked about it a lot in the legal field,
Okay.
and things just didn't add up for me. It just did not make any sense. So when we started following both trials, first the federal and then the state trial, it just didn't make any sense. A lot of witnesses lied. I think the government just did not have enough information to. I was surprised that the jury found him guilty in New York, and then so surprised that they didn't find him not guilty of all counts in Chicago. But here's what I want to say. Listening to both appeals, but especially the appeal today, I kind of felt like the male judge seemed to be intimidating, intentionally trying to intimidate Jennifer, trying to get her to lose focus
Right.
on the key points in terms of why she was there. Obviously, they read the brief. Okay, they read the brief. I'm sure that they have not read any transcripts or any evidence presented from the actual trial itself. So I think, in my personal opinion, it was sort of like a mental manipulation type of thing, trying to get her. And we could hear that in the tone in her voice, and she kept saying, but she fought it. I'm so proud of her. Go Jenny Baji. She really, really, really did everything she gave it her all. I think it's not all lost. I really do not think it's all lost. They intentionally gave the federal government more time because I think it's sort of like a game. It's sort of like we're going to go ahead and give the federal government more time because we know that this is really going to piss the appellant, who is R.KELLY's attorney, off. I mean, it seemed like they gave her an extra 10 minutes to speak.
Right.
Personally found most surprising. Any blogger. Maybe I heard you say that because I watch in the background. But you have a lot of background watchers in the bushes. But what I found very, very remarkable, very, very remarkable, is that nobody ever mentioned the fact that, what is his name, David Orr testified, quote unquote, in trial. His signature was forged on that marriage certificate. Therefore, if the signature was forged, that would have created doubt. If he didn't sign it, who signed it? And if the government could not show who signed it, then that would invalidate the so-called wedding, which I don't believe they were ever married. I think it's something that most likely, like someone said a while back, Ankerson, I can't think of his first name, he probably was trying to use whatever they were trying to concoct for some kind of PR promotion, trying to get her, get her branding out there. She's like, what, 15, 16, whatever.
Right.
And I think they kind of used that over his head. And Demetrius Smith is a criminal, in my personal opinion. And the last thing I want to say, it's hard to believe that everybody can get immunity. How are you going to give everybody immunity? Everybody, even the parents, accusers, some people who work for, how are you going to give everybody? That should be a red flag to the appeals court. That's the first question. How did everybody get immunity? What? And I wish he would have brought up, and when the government said, oh yeah, he married Aaliyah, why didn't she say, well, according to the former, clerk of court, what was it, Deputy David Orr's testimony, he said it was not his signature, that he never signed that document. And how come she didn't say, oh, well, neither did he sign the document? Sorry, I had a dental appointment this morning. Neither did he sign the document, the marriage certificate, but
Right.
they did not have Aaliyah or R.Kelly's signature. So how can that be valid? Because in every state in this country, the bride, the groom, and the officiary must sign not only the marriage certificate, but the bride and the groom have to sign the marriage application before they get their marriage certificate to get married, and it has to be signed by the officiant. Keep
Right.
up the great work. I love you so much, and I love your panel guests, and I do tune in as often as I can.
I appreciate
you so much for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Sorry about that. I see a lot of people saying they can't hear. I don't know. Hopefully it got a little better for you all. I took the mic off and hopefully it got a little better. Someone called in, call back in again. If you called in and I wasn't able to answer, can you call back in again?
All-Purpose Service LLC. To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
Big Bob Opinion, what's going on?
How you doing, Big Bob?
What's going on?
Oh, nothing too much. Just money cap. You can hear me correct?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I appreciate you. First of all, I've been trying to get on your platform. I think we had talked once before, so that's first off I want to get, across. But my opinion, Big Bob, is, and I've been watching you and I love what you've been doing. The first lawyer, I don't know if you hear me.
I'm hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. The first lawyers I see that they dropped the ball, that's really where we need to start at. They didn't do what they should have done from the beginning to be able to get some of the things that now she's trying to appeal sold out. And the bottom line, they violated his rights, I see.
Right.
And the evidence hasn't proven anything to say that he's guilty of the things that they have accused him of.
Right. It's more contradictory than anything.
And the last thing, Big Bob, is I believe it's just bigger than what we know. If you look at ever since I've been seeing all the people are covering this case, the evidence, if you look at from when he got acquitted from back then, if we look at it, we haven't seen no physical evidence of showing that he violated any girls or any underage girl. So I feel that a lot of what's really going on is something that it's a lot of like corruption and on the table things. But I will say that you're doing a good job of covering everything. And hopefully this is my first time that I'll be able to get on the panel when I can really sit up to be able to give you everything that I've been taking down. I'm actually a pastor, and for me to be able to follow this case, I have sons and daughters. And this really is about justice.
Right. And what part of the world are you calling from?
I'm calling from Louisiana. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, man, I'm from Monroe, man.
Oh, okay.
No, I say the last caller was from New Orleans, and now we got a caller from Baton Rouge. Louisiana in here heavy today.
Yeah, and this is something I normally don't do, Big Five, but I ran across your platform, and I just have been listening. What I like about it is
you still there?
Yeah, I just hear echo. Yeah, that might just be how they do it. Wow. Yeah.
I hear you. What you were saying?
Keep doing what you're doing, Big Vibe.
Most definitely, man. Most definitely.
And hopefully, when I catch you, I gotta learn how to set my notifications so I can really get on when you do it and be able to just give you some things. But I'm gonna email you on some things. I know you have a good big platform that you can get a lot of this stuff across. But I appreciate you letting me get on and continue doing what you're doing.
Most definitely, most definitely. Make sure you send that email, because that's another way that you can get on the notification. Get on the notification board to be notified. You know, when I go live, especially with the panels or whatever. I can send you a link. So we got another caller calling in right now.
Okay, I appreciate you, Big Vibe.
No problem.
All right.
Call from Elena. You're set to accept. Press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
Hello?
Hi, Big Vibe. This is Elena again. I went back into the chat and couldn't hear one.
Okay, yeah, I think they can hear better now. They can hear better now.
Can you guys hear better? Okay. So, I'm going to be very quick. First of all, I felt that Dean did a fairly good job considering the hand that she was dealt. Okay. I'm originally from New York, but I've been living in New Orleans for 8 years, going to school out there, which I finished. So I felt that I knew that she was not the original attorney at the trial in New York. However, he treated her like I felt like he was being blatantly rude.
Right.
Trying to do like a little underhanded. I felt like she was disrespected because she filed the appeal on behalf of her client. And if anybody should have been afforded a little bit more time to speak, considering they gave him how many years? 20 years? Was it 20 years in New York?
New York, they gave him 30 years.
30 years in New York, I feel that it was very disrespectful. Number two, the fact that they allowed the government to speak more than the actual appellant was disrespectful. But here's the thing that I was trying to say very, very quickly. Okay, if you read the trial transcript of David Earl, who was the deputy clerk of court at the time, when he was subpoenaed by the federal government, I think, to appear in court to testify regarding the person. He said, when they showed him as exhibit whatever, is this your signature on the marriage license? He said, no. N-O. My signature was forged. If a signature was forged, it means it invalidates the so-called license. Number two, the license itself, the marriage license, is absent of a Leah's signature, because she would have to sign it, typewritten handwriting. It would have to display her signature and also R.KELLY's signature. Now, it's public knowledge. It's all over the internet. You just can Google. There's no signature. But here's something that everybody also missed. Whenever you want to get married, before you actually get the marriage license itself, you have to fill out a marriage application, because you are required by law in every state in the United States of America. You have to produce your authentic birth certificate and a valid ID or passport or whatever. I understand how his original team of attorneys did not question, well, let's subpoena the application? Did they provide their birth certificates? Where is it? Did they provide what form of identification? Okay.
Yeah, because he said, Demetrius Smith said that it was a public aid ID. Then even with the public aid ID that he talked about, he said it did not even have an age on it. And also, when I looked into it, the minister said that he gave the marriage license to Demetrius Smith. There's no way Demetrius Smith can file a marriage license if he didn't officiate the wedding.
Exactly. And also, an officiant is not going to give a marriage license to a third party, meaning Demetrius Smith would be known as the third party. The officiant is going to file it himself with the clerk of court, or the officiant will give it to the wedding party, to the couple, to go ahead and have it recorded themselves. Now, lastly, I'm not going to take too much of your time. Lastly, I was dumbfounded when the government raised that marriage certificate argument, and Jennifer Bonjean did not say, hey, wait a minute, whoa. According to the testimony of the deputy clerk at the time, David Orr, he said, under oath, sworn statement, under oath, during trial, that was not his signature, that it was forged. And also, appellant, sir, madam, whatever, they never produced the application to get the marriage license. That's never been produced. Number two, the ID never has a signature on it. And number three, the marriage certificate itself was absent of a lead signature, R.KELLY signature, and the deputy clerk said it was not his signature and that it was forged. So all they would have to do, if she would, I would hope that she also produced excerpts from that transcript of David Orr, and I hope you can find it and talk about it one day. Thank you, love you.
Thank you too. Thank you for calling back in.
Thank you. Bye.
And see, that's the thing. I know when you talk about things with a passion, when you talk about things that you can speak on those things with a passion. And she made great points. So I got to go back through the transcripts to find David Orr testimony, because she said that David Orr testified that his signature was forged on the marriage certificate. We know that Nathan Edmonds said that he gave the marriage certificate to Demetrius Smith. In my coat. So there's nobody else gonna call in. We about to end this live, man. I really appreciate everybody that came over today. Man, we hitting it. I'm finna try to find this transcript that got a David Orr testimony. If anybody out there had a transcript of David Orr testimony, email it to me at bigvileopinion88@gmail.com. If you know how I can get it or where I can find it, point me in the direction. Leave a comment on the video telling me where to go and find it. I would like to look at David Orr's testimony. And we also understand this. To my caller that just hung up, we also know that Aaliyah had started to file a lawsuit against David Orr, clerk of court, in the David Orr, Clark County Department of Public Health. She was going after these people for this alleged marriage certificate. So you got David Orr saying it wasn't his signature. Then you got Aaliyah saying it wasn't her. Now you got one person. You know, R.KELLY said it wasn't him. Aaliyah said it wasn't her. David Orr said it wasn't him. Demetrius Smith, where did you buy this certificate from? Demetrius Smith, you testified, said Robert had no knowledge of the bribery, but somehow you end up with a marriage certificate. Demetrius Smith, where did you get it from? All right, y'all. I want y'all to have a good day. Until next time, we out of here, man.